Hi, this is Eternal King coming at you with another LOR video today. So I've got some really interesting news. It turns out that I've actually got inspired another meta deck. So typically I was doing something that I don't usually do, which is look at standard deck statistics because I don't play a lot of standard and I tend not to have a huge impact on the format. Obviously I created Emp Army Azirarelia, I created new Rise. Those were very impactful decks. Way back in the day, I inspired Eloy Jarvan, and now more recently, I'm seeing a return of Nightfall in Standard. And I was just posting about like Nightfall win rates, and Nightfall being like a universal format deck that was mid-tier and decent. And now I'm hearing that there is a standard Nightfall deck that is winning 55% of games. Seems oddly coincidental, right? And more so because it's actually an Iron Conquest Nightfall deck. That seems like spookily weird that that specific Nightfall combo would come about. And again, tech ratioing of mine and tech ratioing of other competitive players in LOR are always different. The only deck that someone went card for card and essentially copy pasted was my Rise list, because I don't Rise is not a very well understood archetype. Therefore, there wasn't really any sort of ratio changes for them to make because it's not an understood archetype. But typically, what you see is when people are taking my story decks, is that in the case of Emp Army, sometimes they'll go like one down on the story, and then in the case of this new standard Nightfall deck that is very competitive right now, they went one down on the story, which is fine. It's totally up to you if you want to be on triple Iron Conquest or double Iron Conquest. But it seemed really spooky and coincidental that like all of a sudden there's this mid-tier standard deck after I just kind of talked about this, and I think we built this like on stream. We covered it in terms of a live brew. I posted stats about it on Runeterra AR. So like I was saying that this was like a really decent mid-tier deck. So much so that it was actually playable in Eternal as well. And we've talked about it quite a bit. But yeah, it turns out now that there is a standard equivalent. Obviously, ratio changes, stuff like Unspeakable Horror, Into Dusk, cards I don't like in for the Eternal format are probably better in standard specifically. Also cards like Heaven's Align, right, and then like the triple fading memories. So like it's just like this stuff, right? It's just like slight ratio tweaks in terms of like I don't like Heaven's Align as a card. I think it's yes, it counts as a reliable Nightfall activator, but it's also just like an RNG card that you have no control over. I like the one fading memories, and then typically I like Glare more so than I like Unspeakable Horror slash Onto Dusk. But like at the end of the day, this was the basic shell that I presented. It was essentially Iron Conquest Nightfall with Chain Caster, with topping out on a 3 mana curve. Like that was the whole deck that I presented, and now we have a 55% standard equivalent of that. So this kind of keeps happening to me in LOR specifically. I used to post about like, oh, Eloy Jarvan, reaching Diamond really easy in Standard, like back in the day. And then, here's my Rise list that's winning, a very high percentage of games for Rise. And then like, here's my Emp Army deck, and Emp Army is the true upgrade to Azirarelia. And I've done this like time and time again, and people just keep ninja sniping my decks. Like they don't want to say that I'm a good player, they don't want to admit that I have a format influence. So they've just kind of like shadow borrowed it. So like I never had anyone say thank you, Eternal King, for your Rise list. They just took it card for card and then just called it their own and ran the stats for it. It's like, no, that's my deck, card for card. And then, Sonny grabbed my Emp Army deck and he did some easy ratio swaps. And then he said it was the best deck in the game. And it's like, no, Sonny, that's my Emp Army deck. And then countless other people have stolen it since then. And now we also have standard Nightfall. So it's like my decks are creeping into the standard format completely by accident. And it is these sort of high value story decks. Iron Conquest, Nightfall, and then of course Emp Army Azirarelia. Typically, you'll know it's one of my decks by the story inclusion, because at first, when stories were released, people thought these cards were bad. There are countless videos that you can find of top players, people like Grappler. Mogwai was out of the game by then, but there are countless videos by top competitive players who said that stories were bad cards. And if you actually go back to my video, to all of my videos, or at least my video archive, you'll see that I have literally a video just saying that stories are game changers. Like, that was literally just, that was literally the whole thing. Story. There we go. It was literally just saying that these cards are good. I just universally said that these cards are good cards, and that there are very few situations where these cards do not have a massive impact on the meta. The only people who would think that these cards don't have a massive impact are in fact bad players. It took a while. Granted, there was a lot of a learning curve associated with these cards to make them mainstream, but like, you started seeing them creep in. You saw the Wings Giving Nidalee be like a really good competitive deck for a little bit. You started seeing, obviously, Emp Army brews. You started seeing Iron Conquest brews with Hecarim, but now the more competitive version is just Nightfall because it's a lower curve, more aggressive deck. Obviously, you saw a little Family Reunion see some play. I've seen Light of Demacia Pantheon most recently. So again, like, that one's not mine. I didn't do Light of Demacia, and I didn't do Wings Giving. So like, I can objectively say these weren't my decks. And then I think Sunny was the only one that played around with Pit of Champions and never caught on. It was never competitive. But Iron Conquest, Emp Army, these decks have now been proven to, A, be a very good standard card, B, be one of the best Eternal cards, and the only person you can really thank for that is me, as far as I know. And I think people are playing around with Petricite Hall in Standard now, and it's starting to catch on for that format. But yeah, if you go way back to when the new expansion launched, there's literally a video saying that stories are insane. I'm kind of treading old ground here by just letting you know that they're still some of the best cards that LOR has ever seen, and it was also part of the last expansion that LOR will ever see. And the ripples of that are essentially lasting from, when the expansion launched, and I made that statement that no one agreed with at the time, to now. When now everyone is using story cards aggressively for all formats, right? Azir Aurelia being one of the best decks in Eternal, essentially Duplicate Nightfall being, one of the best decks for Standard. That's really the full extent of it. I've kind of gotten used to it. Some people will get upset about all the deck stealing, but like, I used to be on out of cards, and I would brew decks that would would inspire other ratioing and other lists, and it would happen all the time to me, constantly, because creativity is typically very much lacking in the LR community, and always has been. There's a lot of borrowing of ideas, but yeah, when it comes to my stuff, it's very blatant. Again, Emp Army, my deck, #1 played deck in Eternal. Actual competitive Rise is the number 11 deck played in Eternal, and now we have 55% Duplicate Nightfall being, one of the best decks in Standard. It's just, it keeps happening time and time again. It's like, I point to something and I draw attention to it and I say, hey guys, this is actually worth mentioning, it's actually worth paying attention to, and then it like immediately becomes one of the best things ever. So at that point, I would love it, I guess, if people just started jumping on to everything that I, provide numbers for. Like, if somebody wants to take on, in December, upgraded Ziggs Poppy and compare and contrast the stats of Vex versus Poppy in a Ziggs, Poppy deck, if you want to try that and see which one of these wins more, I'd be really curious to see, right? Because I think that Vex has some serious tempo advantages over Poppy in certain situations. The curve of Ziggs into Vex is just like really nasty, and also allows you to run Legion Grenadier instead of House Spider, which for the most part, House Spider's only there because of Poppy. It doesn't make any sense otherwise. There are things about this deck that feel better than the Poppy deck, but again, you have to run the numbers. You have to run them side by side. So if you guys want to, steal upgraded Ziggs Poppy or Ziggs Vex and run it against, old school Ziggs Poppy, give it a shot. Let me know. I'm curious about the numbers there. I already know this is a 60% win rate deck in Eternal. The numbers are already there. It doesn't matter how you slice it. Emp Army is a 60% win rate deck. I know that Rise is a 50% win rate deck, which is the best that Rise ever was and ever will be. It is my version card for card. And then I also know that Duplicate Nightfall is now currently a 55% win rate deck in Standard. I would love to see a lot of things get revisited, because again, if the stealing, if what I point to is just naturally competitive and is just naturally producing stats, I would love if people just kind of just double down on the whole idea of taking my stuff. Like don't even try hiding anymore. Just be like 100%. Okay, Eternal King has pointed to this. Let's run the numbers and see how it goes. If I point to I don't know, Lee Sin, right? And I say that, oh man, Lee Sin's a real sleeper this December. I really want to see Lee Sin Temple pick up. And like I would never say that because I'm not like a Lee Sin guy. But let's pretend I said that, right? And I was just like, oh man, people be sleeping on Lee Sin Temple. That's the deck you want to be running right now, right? If I say that, and it turns out to be true, that's great. Give me a shout out. Basically, I would just like a few more shout-outs if I can from the community, that if you're going to curb my deck and micro-rotate out like 6 cards or something, and do it like over and over again, and in some cases literally just take the entire deck card for card and not tell anyone. If you're going to do that, or you're going to make a video saying that Emp Army is the most competitive deck in the format and not tell anyone, if you're going to do that, just give me a shout-out if you can. This is Eternal King, signing out.